Happy Monday, and welcome back to the LordanArts channel. I'm John Lordan. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. Case Cracked is the show where we look into a mystery and what are the critical pieces that help solve that mystery. Today's episode is called The Lonely Target. Wolf River Township in Wisconsin is a quiet, small town. With only 1,800 residents, most rely on farming, a cheese production company, a plastic bag maker, or the local sawmill to provide their income. This was almost the perfect living situation for 37-year-old Glenn Kopitske. He lived close to his parents, Virgil and Shirley. The couple had adopted Glenn after having to bury 2 children of their own. His mother described her son as a loner who was funny and eccentric. Despite this shyness, Glenn made his mark on the town. In 1996, he took the money he saved from his disability checks, which he received for bipolar disorder, and money saved from his time working at Walmart and as a substitute teacher. He used that $500 to run for president of the United States. Unfortunately, he wasn't within the age range to be able to run. That's when he decided to run for Wisconsin's 56th District Assembly. He lost that election and ran again 2 years later for a seat in the 6th Congressional District Assembly. When he lost that too, he decided to pursue his passion for acting. In 2002, he was offered a small role in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat at the Wapaka Community Theater. He performed well, but still put distance between himself and the people around him. He was described as very solitary by the other actors. Regardless, his mother and father kept up with their son regularly and still helped him out when he had car trouble, which seemed to be a lot. He was content to live by himself with his lab mix rescued dog. On August 2nd, 2003, Shirley began to worry. She had attended a wedding in Milwaukee days before and hadn't been able to reach Glenn. When she returned to town, she went to his house to check on him. She arrived and found his dog outside in a very agitated state. The back door was locked, and that was something that Glenn never did. Once she had gained entry to the house, she began to search. Nothing seemed out of place, but when she came to the bedroom, she found Glenn. He was naked on the floor and had been deceased for at least a couple of days. Because of the summer heat, the cause of death wasn't obvious and would have to be determined by a pathologist. When investigators arrived, they found no signs of a struggle. It didn't appear anything had been taken from the home, except for Glenn's keys, which couldn't be found. His body had marks on it, but due to the decomposition, they weren't easily identified. The search of the house turned up nothing, so investigators turned their attention to canvassing the town and questioning everyone they could. The only lead they came up with came from one of Glenn's far-flung neighbors. He stated that a couple days before, at night, he saw an older car with square headlights driving slowly down the road. He also said that it was flashing a light from the vehicle that appeared to look at residences on the dead-end street. His account was put into the case file, but no leads came from it. When the pathologist arrived for work the next week, he noticed liquid near Glenn's head on the gurney. It was coming from a quarter-size wound at the back of his head. Once the autopsy was completed, it was found that Glenn had actually died from a gunshot to the head. This type of close-range shot left no blood spatter or exit wound, even though the murder was committed with a shotgun. Marks that investigators saw on his torso but were unsure of the cause turned out to be stab wounds that were post-mortem. Now, investigators knew what they were dealing with. Glenn had been murdered, but they still had no leads to follow. For 5 months, they worked the case, but it was quickly going cold. Then on January 1st, 2004, investigators received a call that would lead them in a direction that no one expected. A young woman named Olivia Toma claimed to know who murdered Glenn. She stated that a few weeks after the murder, local golden boy Gary Hirte was with her at the county fair when he confessed to the killing. She didn't believe him any more than the officers who were taking down her report. Hirte was known to everyone in town. Standing at 6'4" and weighing 240 pounds, he wasn't just a star athlete in track, wrestling, and football. He was also an honor student and the first child from his town to become an Eagle Scout in the last 20 years. He was featured weekly in the town newspaper. As her story continued to unfold, she gave investigators specifics about the crime scene and the murder itself that only the murderer would know. They started to take her more seriously. For months, she had talked to Hirte, taking in the details and looking into them as much as she could online. When she became convinced that he was actually telling the truth, she began to fear for her life and for Hirte's, since he had talked about taking his own life. She also stated that Hirte had told various friends that he had committed the murder as well, but none of them took him seriously. Hirte's friends were questioned, and a boy named Eric Wenzelow filled in some interesting details. He claimed that before Glenn's murder, Hirte asked him to go shining for deer. This was something the two would do, driving around using a spotlight to try to spot deer in the wild. He thought nothing of it, as they did this often on Hirte's nights off. This time, they went spotlighting in the area around Glenn's house. Eric remembers exactly where this was because his girlfriend lived close by. 2 weeks after the murder, Eric said that Hirte called him. Eric asked him if he knew about the murder. Jokingly, he added, "It sounds like something you would do." "I did," Hirte replied. As evidence of his dark deed, he produced a bloody knife sheath that he used to carry an 8-inch hunting knife, as well as the keys to Glenn's house. When he was asked why he didn't come forward, Eric said, "The keys? To me, they were just keys. He likes to brag about things, but you don't really believe that stuff." They also found that the description given for the car that had been seen in the area during the time frame of the murder fit Hirte's father's 11-year-old Dodge Dynasty. To help bolster their case, on January 28th, police recorded a call between Olivia and Hirte. In it, he went into more detail about the murder. With this new evidence in hand, Hirte was arrested at his family home the next day. His parents were in such disbelief that officers had to explain exactly why they were there. During their search, they found Glenn's keys and 2 shotguns. Hirte's hunting knife and sheath was tested for DNA. Material was found, and it came back as a match to Glenn. At Hirte's trial, his defense changed a not guilty plea to that of insanity when they claimed that his admissions of, "I killed him to see if I could get away with it," were arrogance covering a trauma. Now, Hirte claimed that he and Glenn had a consensual sexual encounter while Hirte was drunk one night. He stated that he had homosexual urges when he drank, but this was the first time that he had ever given in to them. When he sobered, he became enraged by what had happened. In a moment of insanity, he went back to Glenn's house and shot him. The prosecution stated that Hirte had actually targeted Glenn because he was a recluse who Hirte thought no one would miss. They didn't believe there was ever a sexual encounter and that Glenn was targeted simply because of his isolation. There were no fingerprints because Hirte wore gloves. The deer slug he used in the shotgun could kill a deer at 50 feet, but at close range left no exit wound, preventing blood splatter. Internet searches showed that he even took the phase of the moon that night into consideration and made sure it would offer little light for anyone to see by. He chose a time when there had been no rain, which would show footprints or tire tracks. When he was done, he left by the back door, locking it in the hopes that it would keep the murder secret for as long as possible. On March 17, 2005, Hirte was found guilty of Glenn Kopitske's murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 32 years. When he was asked for a statement about the murder, Hirte replied that he can't feel guilty for killing Glenn out of disgust over their encounter. "There's no reason I should be held accountable for this. That's just the way I feel. I can't change that," he replied. He offered apologies to his family for what he had caused, but nothing for Glenn's family. Glenn's parents spoke of their sorrow over losing their son. They say that in the time before his death, he was very lonely. When you live alone and you're 37 years old and you're not married and everyone else is, Shirley Kopitske said, why would he not be lonely? He was a little bit different, eccentric, and that made him a target. Case cracked. I would like to thank crimelibrary.com, abcnews.go.com, nbcnews.com, and stuffmagazine.com. Of course, the biggest thank you goes to Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's case, and here she is now to discuss it with us. Christy, I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm just really unclear on the motive for this case.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure that I believe that angle on that he just wanted to show that he could get away with it.
Well, you're not the only one. A man named Quimby, who knows Hurt's family and worked with him to help get his Boy Scout merit badges, he says that he doesn't believe Hurt killed to see if he could do it either.
Hmm.
He doesn't believe he tried to outsmart investigators, none of that. He said, I don't think anybody in town can believe the situation.
Honestly, the explanation that there was some kind of romantic encounter between the men sort of makes more sense in my mind. And
Mm-hmm.
keep in mind, Glenn is also found nude when he is found. There's also the unreasonable belief that Hurt states that because they did that, it was Glenn's fault. I mean, I know they're trying to throw it into an insanity plea, which obviously they don't get,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, I can't believe how unreasonable that is. It's like, oh
No.
yeah, I got drunk and I slept with this guy, and it's his fault that I did that. Like it's insane.
Yeah,
I,
it's ridiculous.
and maybe that's what he was going for because they were literally going for an insanity plea. But
Well, that's true. It could have been.
yeah,
So let me hit you with some facts.
okay,
Okay, the National Center for Biotechnology Information states the unique experiences of men who have sex with men residing in culturally conservative rural areas are not well represented in scientific literature.
mm,
A study was conducted in Oklahoma that showed a stigmatizing social environment and less access to sexual minority medical care within these areas. Hostile cultural norms were also noted. And living in a rural area, I completely agree with this.
yeah, that does add another wrinkle to this whole thing. I mean, we're hearing about Glenn kind of being this person that socializes differently. I think it's fair to
Mm-hmm.
say that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not out of the realm of possibility that that is a part of his lifestyle that none of his family would have ever known about.
Mhm.
It might have been really tough to come out in that type of area, and it sounds like this information that you found kind of backs that up. Plus,
Yeah.
if Hurt was dealing with feelings like that as well, they don't have access to any resources to really help them
No.
or support
No.
them in figuring that out for themselves and finding a happy, healthy life around that. There was probably the opposite. There was probably a lot of shame that they would actually be dealing with socially if, either of them was to come out with that.
See, and it's pretty clear that this town had a specific vision of him in mind, the athletic, overachieving Boy Scout, you know?
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Paul Mayu, who owns a Dairy Queen where Hurt worked weekends for 2.5 years, he says that when he was initially arrested, they'd keep Hurt's job open for him. I mean, he was quoted as saying, we're standing by him based on what we know about him.
Wow. Guy's being accused of murder and we're going to keep his job for him. Wow.
Yeah. And Winslow, who wound up testifying against Hurt in court, he said some of Hurt's other friends don't believe Hurt's version of events as to why he killed Kopitske. He said there was never a moment when I hung around with him that he showed homosexual urges or anything. So I didn't believe that at all.
It's weird. So this guy winds up testifying against him.
Mm-hmm.
And effectively, here we have him again. Well, I don't believe what he's saying. He also didn't believe him when Hurt told him I killed a man.
Yeah.
It's so weird, like just the vision that this community has about Hurt, and they just won't let anything infringe on their belief. It's like a belief structure issue, like their beliefs are just so strong.
Well, and none of this was good for the community in general. I mean, it
Yeah,
was just bad news.
yeah.
Remember Satanic Panic?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this case brought about what would be referred to as gay panic. Even the prosecutor, Lennon, thinks Hurt's story's made up. He's convinced Kopitske wasn't gay, and he says, I resent Gary Hurt using this gay panic as a defense. If, in fact, the homosexual episode took place, I resent the whole notion, their whole defense, that this was somehow justifying the murder.
It's really interesting. So effectively, you even have the prosecutor just saying they don't have a motive. No one
Yeah.
knows the motive then because they've basically shuttled both different versions. Either he did it because he was hyper arrogant and an overachiever and he thought he could get away with it and he just picked Glenn,
Mm-hmm.
like picking, a name out of a hat, or there was an actual encounter between them, but we're not going to believe that either. It's really It's so strange when you see belief structures run this strong that just logic just has to bounce off them and get out of the way. And that's really what it seems like in this case.
It is. And this kind of ignorance that they live in helps nobody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah. And the gay panic thing actually goes both ways too. Like it's one of those things where, yeah, I know that they don't want to admit that this story that, oh no, Hirte's not gay. Well, yeah, well, Kopitske's not gay either. I mean, come on, guys. Like we don't have to be that fearful of it in general. It's kind of disappointing on all fronts.
No. And you know how they talk about, the friends were saying, oh, well, he never acted that way around me.
Right.
Well, he's not, he knows they're not going to be accepting of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh, and I do have a little piece of trivia for you.
Okay.
Hirte's lawyer was Gerald Boyle. Boyle was also Jeffrey Dahmer's lawyer. And we know how well that went, right?
Yeah. Yeah. This guy picks the winners, apparently. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Christy. We really appreciate you. And I've got some other people to thank right now. Thank you, PayPal supporters Amanda Beard and Jennifer Wilson. Since 2015, we have always run limited commercial ads for the benefit of the viewers and the families we're trying to help. Obviously, we can't do that without support. If you'd like to help, please visit LordanArts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee, like Josh Kaufman recently did. We really appreciate your support on our mission to run as few ads as possible and help as many cases as we can. Remember, you can get another LordanArts story every week on the Seriously Mysterious podcast. A new episode is coming tomorrow and every Tuesday after that. Visit SeriouslyMysterious.com and subscribe on your favorite podcatchers. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon below so you never miss an upload. Also, if you'd like to catch one of our weekly Secret Studio live shows, be sure to check the description box below for our new channel link, LordanArts Studio 2. And of course, I'll be back with the new Unsolved Mystery for you on Friday, right here on the LordanArts channel.